The Midnight Gravedigger. Old Joe Thompson was a fixture in the small town of Ravens Hollow. With his weathered face and calloused hands, he'd been the town's gravedigger for nearly 40 years. Known for his quiet demeanour and tireless work ethic, Joe preferred to work under the cover of darkness, digging graves by the light of the moon and his old lantern. The townspeople respected his dedication, and the fact that he always had the graves ready for the funerals the next day. Joe didn't mind the night. He found solace in the silence, the cool air, and the way the moonlight cast long shadows over the gravestones. But the graveyard, with its ancient gnarled trees and crumbling tombstones, had a history, one that the older townsfolk whispered about, but rarely discussed in the open. They said the cemetery was haunted, that strange things happened there after dark. Joe dismissed these stories as mere superstition. He had never seen a ghost, never heard a whisper from beyond the grave. Until one night in late October, when the air was thick with the scent of decaying leaves and an unnatural chill hung over the graveyard. Joe arrived at the cemetery just after midnight, his lantern casting a warm glow in the darkness. He had a new grave to dig for a funeral scheduled the next afternoon, a young woman named Emily Harper, who had died under mysterious circumstances. Her sudden death had shocked the town, and there were rumours that she had been involved in something sinister. As Joe set to work, the shovel biting into the cold, damp earth, he couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The cemetery was quieter than usual, the night unusually still. He shrugged it off and continued digging, the rhythmic sound of the shovel hitting the ground providing some comfort. Halfway through his work, Joe thought he heard a faint whisper. He paused, listening intently. The whispering grew louder, and a murmur of voices carried on the wind. He looked around but saw nothing out of the ordinary. He tried to dismiss it as his imagination, but the whispering persisted, growing more distinct and unsettling. Joe's grip tightened on the shovel as he resumed digging, his heart pounding in his chest. The whispers seemed to surround him, echoing off the gravestones. He caught fragments of words, too garbled to make sense of. He shook his head, trying to clear his mind, but the voices only grew louder, more insistent. Suddenly his shovel hit something solid with a dull thud. Joe frowned, puzzled. He hadn't dug deep enough to reach a coffin yet. He knelt down and brushed away the dirt, revealing a large ornate box, an old iron-bound chest half buried in the earth. Curiosity getting the better of him, Joe pried open the chest. Inside, he found an assortment of old, yellowed papers and a small, intricately carved wooden box. He picked up the box, turning it over in his hands. It felt oddly warm to the touch, almost pulsing with a life of its own. As he opened the box, a chill ran down his spine. Inside was a small, weathered book bound in dark leather. The cover was embossed with strange symbols that Joe didn't recognise. He opened the book, his lantern casting a flickering light on the pages filled with spidery handwritten text. It looked like some sort of diary or journal, written in a language Joe couldn't understand. Suddenly the whispering voices became clearer, louder. Joe's eyes widened in horror as he realised the voices were coming from the book. He dropped it, stumbling back. The book fell open on the ground, its pages fluttering wildly as if caught in a gust of wind. The voices grew into a cacophony, screaming in an ancient, forgotten tongue. The ground beneath Joe began to tremble, the gravestones shaking violently. The chest snapped shut with a resounding clang, and from the disturbed earth, skeletal hands began to emerge. Joe watched in terror as the dead clawed their way out of their graves, their hollow eyes fixed on him. He tried to run, but his legs felt like lead. The spirits of the dead surrounded him, their rotting faces twisted in anguish and rage. They reached for him with bony fingers, their touch icy and painful. Joe screamed, but his cries were swallowed by the darkness. In the centre of the chaos, the book lay open, its pages glowing with an eerie light. The spirits seemed drawn to it, their voices rising in a frenzied chant. Joe realised with a sinking dread that the book was the source of their torment, a relic of dark magic that had been buried to keep its evil contained. Desperate, Joe lunged for the book, hoping to close it and stop the madness. But as his fingers touched the pages, a searing pain shot through his body. The spirits closed in on him, their screams deafening. In his final moments, Joe understood the terrible truth. The book had been waiting for someone to find it, to unleash its horrors upon the world once more. The next morning, the townsfolk found the cemetery in disarray. Gravestones were toppled, the earth churned and disturbed. Joe was nowhere to be found. The grave he had been digging was empty, save for an old, iron-bound chest and a small, carved wooden box. Rumours spread quickly, and the cemetery was closed off, the entrance sealed with heavy chains. No one dared to enter, fearful of what might lurk within. The legend of Joe Thompson and the cursed book became a cautionary tale, a warning to those who might disturb the rest of the dead. But on moonlit nights, when the wind whispered through the trees, some claimed they could still hear the faint echo of Joe's screams, a reminder of the darkness that lay buried beneath the soil, waiting to be unearthed once more. The night shift. It was Harry's first night working the graveyard shift at the Crescent Ridge industrial plant. He had taken the job out of necessity, money was tight, and night shifts paid better. The plant, a sprawling complex of metal and machinery, was a relic from a bygone era. By day it was bustling with activity, but by night it became a labyrinth of shadows and eerie silence. Harry's task was simple: monitor the control room, ensure the machinery kept running, and report any issues. He was given a brief tour by Tom, the grizzled day shift supervisor, who handed him a flashlight and a radio. "Just stay in the control room," Tom advised, "and if you hear anything strange, call me. Don't go wandering around." Harry nodded, dismissing the warning as overcautious. He settled into the control room, a small space filled with screens and dials, and watched as the plant's operations hummed on. At around midnight, Harry heard the first noise, a faint clanging from somewhere deep within the plant. He checked the monitors but saw nothing unusual. The sound persisted, growing louder and more erratic. Unease gnawed at him, but he decided to investigate. Grabbing his flashlight, Harry ventured into the darkened corridors of the plant. The metal walkways echoed with his footsteps, and the shadows seemed to stretch and bend in the beam of his flashlight. He followed the noise, which led him to an old storage area that hadn't been used in years. The air in the storage room was thick with dust and the smell of rust. Harry swept the flashlight across the room, revealing rows of abandoned equipment and crates. The clanging had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. He was about to turn back when he heard a whisper. "Help me." Harry's blood ran cold. The voice was faint, almost childlike. He swept the flashlight around but saw no one. The whisper came again, clearer this time. "Help me, please." Following the voice, Harry moved deeper into the storage area. The light flickered, and he cursed under his breath. The beam landed on an old locker at the far end of the room. It was slightly ajar, and the voice seemed to be coming from within. Harry hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But curiosity and a sense of duty pushed him forward. He reached the locker, the metal door creaking as he pulled it open. Inside was nothing but darkness and a profound chill that seemed to seep into his bones. Suddenly the door slammed shut behind him and the flashlight flickered out. Panic set in as Harry fumbled with the radio, but it was dead. He was plunged into complete darkness. Then he heard it, a slow, deliberate scratching from inside the locker. Harry stumbled back, his breath coming in short, terrified gasps. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, as if something was trying to claw its way out. With a surge of adrenaline, Harry managed to prise the locker door open. The scratching stopped abruptly, and the flashlight flickered back to life. The locker was empty, but the chill remained, more intense than before. Shaken, Harry hurried back to the control room, the corridors now feeling like a maze of terror. As he entered the room, he saw that all the monitors were showing static. Then, one by one, they flickered back to life, displaying scenes from different parts of the plant. To his horror, the screens showed shadowy figures moving through the corridors, their forms indistinct but unmistakably human. They moved with unnatural, jerky motions, as if puppets controlled by unseen hands. Harry grabbed the radio and frantically called Tom. "Tom! There's something in the plant! I need help!" The radio crackled and Tom's voice came through, distorted and filled with static. "Get out of there, Harry! Leave now!" As Harry turned to leave, the control room door slammed shut, trapping him inside. The shadows on the screen seemed to converge, moving toward the control room. The temperature dropped further, and Harry's breath formed icy clouds in the air. He pounded on the door, desperate to escape, but it wouldn't budge. The shadows reached the door and the control room lights flickered. The whispering began again, a chorus of voices this time, rising to a deafening crescendo. Harry fell to his knees, clutching his head, the voices piercing his mind. "Help us, join us, forever!" With a final desperate effort, Harry threw himself at the door. It gave way and he stumbled into the corridor. He ran, the voices and shadows pursuing him, the plant now a nightmarish landscape of flickering lights and oppressive darkness. He burst out of the plant into the cold night air, collapsing on the ground. The whispers faded, and the shadows seemed to retreat back into the building. Tom arrived moments later, helping him to his feet. "I told you not to go wandering," Tom said grimly. "This place, it's haunted. Those who die here never leave." Harry never returned to the plant, and the memories of that night haunted him forever. The whispers, the shadows, and the sense of an unseen presence stayed with him, a constant reminder of the night he almost joined the lost souls of Crescent Ridge Industrial Plant.